Hey, sometimes you've just got to change, and sometimes maybe some of your team need to change. So today we're going to be talking with someone who knows all about this and how role clarity isn't very sexy, but it's really helpful for your teams. So I'd really love to introduce Celia Swales to you today, who's going to be sharing all things butt busting.
I knew I was telling you that.
Welcome, Celia. So let's get to the butt busting in a minute, because I'm sure everyone's really interested in hearing about that. But would you like to share something quirky or interesting about yourself so we can get to know you a bit better?
Well, I said what I was going to say, so I'll say it again. I play with clay outside of work. So I make things, and I have one I prepared earlier.
Wow. What is that?
It's a gargoyle.
That is fantastic. Hey, do you know the difference between grotesques and gargoyles?
I think that's a grotesque rather than a gargoyle. Nice pickup.
But, it sounds good. So for people who know, I remember at my bus tour of Oxford 20 years ago that a gargoyle has water shooting out of it, doesn't it? And a grotesque doesn't.
Yes.
Anyway, that's an aside. So tell me a little bit about you being a butt buster. I love it.
Yes, I was having I was in a networking session actually, and I was networking with a couple of marketing people, and they decided to turn their minds potentially not as seriously to my business. And I had shared with them that one of the phrases that leaders say when they come to talk to me is, I've got someone and they're good at their job, but, and I work with the but bit. I'm not sure how I'd go branding the business that way, though.
It might be good. I've got some good visuals happening in my mind. Now we want to talk today, more about, those situations where you've got good people, but, often I was talking to Carmen recently, and I said to her, people aren't really clear about their roles as much as they could be. Maybe, we need to do job descriptions. What do we need to do? We really need them to get clear. So tell us a little bit about role clarity, because, the title is it's not sexy, but it is important, isn't it?
Actually, the way it appears on mine is having role clarity is not sex. So I'm not sure what that says. That's what's going on my screen.
That's my typo. Well, it says a lot.
It's a good point of clarification in the age of consent. But so role clarity, I guess our experience is that we see an ad on a website, and we go, that's the job for me, and we read the job description, and we get in there and we discover that the job description is not all of the story. And then we kind of make it up as we go, because job descriptions are often 16 pages long, or they don't have any detail, or people say, I know it's not in your job description, but you need to do these things. And so I guess the thing that I love working with is actually how can you get clear in what is required of you in role and what is required in the people you work with in role, so that you can do that in the moment and have a conversation in the moment, rather than having referring back to a job description, which usually doesn't give you the landscape of what's happening.
Yeah. So do you think that people, leaders feel more secure that they've got a job description, and people feel more secure, but that it's just not effective?
Yeah, I think it fits in with one of those things where you have one because it meets the requirements of the procedures and the policies and the qualities, but you only ever pull it out when things are going pear-shaped, or when you have to hire someone. So it's not actually a useful document in the day-to-day living.
Yeah. So what do you have instead?
So I like to work with 6 questions that kind of you can answer and discuss in the moment. And often when I am working with a team and I get people to do a bit of a blurb on these 6 questions, their colleagues who've been working with them forever discover something new. I had a team saying, oh, you do actually do something. I had no idea what you did, just because they've been able to work with the questions. And so the 6 questions are, what is the purpose of your role? So why is the company spending money on the role? What is the key outcome of your or the key task of that role, which you can use as a decision-making point about how you use your time? What are the key chunks of work and that you spend most of your time doing? What do other people's roles need from you in order for them to be successful? And what do you need from other roles to be successful? And what are the boundaries?
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So, can we break that down a little bit? Yeah. So let's look at the first 2 or 3. Tell us about that first one, the purpose of the role. So how would people put that together? Have you got an example of a role, for instance?
Yeah, so the purpose of the role is usually where you're kind of linking back to the purpose of the business, because there should be a line of sight somewhere in that. And it kind of is important to know that, because one of the things that we know about performance and team performance is if you know why your job exists, you have some meaning involved in what you're doing, and that actually helps people feel engaged. And so an example of a purpose can be around managing something that achieves the outcomes for the business. So it might be managing a finance. The purpose might be that you're in managing finance for this business. Yeah.
Okay. So for our business, it might be because we're looking at hiring an account manager, and the purpose is really to look after new and existing clients long term. Yeah. Yep. So that would be the purpose. So just to clarify with these questions, when you say ask them, does the management ask themselves, like the leaders ask themselves to get clear? Do you ask the person you put in the role? Like, how does it work?
Well, it depends, because you can work with these in any way. Like, you can work with it yourself if you're not clear, and then go and have a conversation with the manager, so you can fill out your thoughts around what it is, and say, this is what I'm working towards. Is that the same as what you're going to measure me on? And it's great for teams, because a lot of teams, I don't know whether you've ever had this experience, but people in teams think that their work is really important, but don't understand what the other people are trying to do. And so they just appear like they're obstacles to what you're trying to do, or they appear like they're not actually doing anything useful. And so having those conversations across teams can be really useful.
Great. So it sounds like if you, we often don't, we think what we're most important in the world. I don't have other people out there might do that occasionally. And therefore, your stuff is more important than other stuff, and that's caused a bit of conflict as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes your roles can actually be in conflict. So one of the really the ones that I find a lot is if I'm in an operational role, the time frame and the purpose of my role is to actually keep this service delivery happening, and my primary task is to lead this team to deliver a service. And I'm talking with someone in finance or HR or somewhere else in the business, and they're thinking that I need to actually solve problems over a 2-3 year period. I need to solve it for the business, versus a person in the operations says, I just need an answer now. Just give me an answer about what to do now. And the person in the central office, because their role is about how do you improve things over time, is going, well, I'll write you a process. And so you're in conflict, because I want an answer now, and that person's going, well, I need to write a process for that so that everybody has that answered.
Yeah, and that is hysterical, because Carmen and I fight over that all the time, because we have different roles and our brains work differently, and I want, the answer for 3 months, 6 months, where are we heading, big picture, and she wants tactical, what are we doing tomorrow?
Yes.
So, and we talk a lot and get along, well, but there's even conflict with us. So I can imagine in larger teams, it could cause a lot of hiccups.
Yes, yeah, and the second thing that can happen is that we all go into a role, and there are bits of roles we like, and there are bits of roles that we perhaps are non-preferred parts of our role. You know, like for me, admin.
Yeah.
And accounting and things like that. And so we spend all of our time in the things that we like to do, and we avoid the things that we don't like to do, and that causes problems for other people.
Yeah, great. Yes, Daniela, I'll just check with Celia. Are you happy to share the questions with people afterwards, after the show?
Yep, no problem.
Great. And thanks for your question, Daniela. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we've talked about number one, which was the purpose of the role. Number two was around tasks. What are the key tasks of the role? So tell us about that one.
So number 2 and 3 are kind of the same, similar. One is the primary task of the role. So what outcome are you working towards? And the way that you use that is a bit of a compass, because we get, someone described to me the other day that an email is just a delivery device for other people's priorities. And so we wander off, doing this stuff that other people see as important, and we don't actually get to the stuff that is important for us in our roles. And so having a really clear primary statement about what it is the role's meant to achieve, or the outcomes, can make you kind of judge in the moment whether something's useful, is a high priority or a low priority. And so just having a simple statement of, I have to lead this team in order to deliver a high quality outcome for retail, or for, whatever it is, the industry you're in, means that you can manage the incoming and actually prioritize based on what it is that you're meant to be doing. And if that's not working, you have conversations about whether that does that need to change. Is the way you're working not working with the rest of the organisation? Do you need to redescribe what you need to do, or refocus what you're doing? And then that 3 is, what are the kind of key chunks of work are we doing? And that's not meant to be a shopping list like job descriptions are, where they describe everything. They just, it's meant to be kind of, if I'm spending 80% of my time doing these 5 things, then I'm on track.
Yeah. Okay, great. So it sounds like it's almost like this moving down. So it's high level, the purpose. Then the second one is like the key task, or, the key thing, and then within that there's the chunks below, number 3.
Yep. Okay, and then the last 3 are kind of going a bit back out into the organisation. So the next 2 are about how does your role relate to other roles? So between you and Carmen, what is critical that you need to deliver to her role so that she can be successful in her role? And what are the key things that you need to deliver, so the outputs and the inputs to your role to other roles? And that is a great conversation to have in teams, because usually frustration comes because people don't even understand that they're supposed to be delivering something to people, or that it's critical for their success that they get something. And you can start to have conversations when you work with a team around those 2 items, whether it's behavioural or whether it's task-based. So what do you need to give to other roles, and what do other roles need to receive from you? So that's the kind of interactional piece outwards into the organisation or the team.
Yeah. And what I think about is really pertinent. I'll give you an example. So this is actually, I think, question 4, guys. So it's question 4, is that, so Carmen and I have, because of the differences and the difference in roles, we've come up with a way. So what I need to give Carmen is time for operational decision making.
Beautiful.
It has to be, and we do it twice a week. And what she needs to give me is needs to give me more time to do more creative output, and she also needs to give time for discussions around vision and future in the business. So they're just some practical, things where you're going, well, you need that, I need that. How are we going to make it work for both of us? But do you find that there's sometimes where people give one way and it's not reciprocated?
Yes. And if you don't have the conversation, then you can have an incredible amount of frustration, well up. And what can often happen when someone's not giving you what you need is you then overfunction into their role. So you're doing your own role plus a pieces of other people's role. And then people start to rely on you doing it. And the other person goes, oh, well, they're doing it, so I don't need to do that bit. And so they have a lovely time because they're no longer doing something that they need to do, and the other person's doing it. But the other person's getting judged on their role and how they're going in their role, plus this extra bit that they've taken it on.
Yeah.
So, you know, then it becomes then the burden's there, and that dynamic is often entrenched over years in organisations.
Yeah. And so then you get, you know, one of them feeling like a martyr doing this extra stuff. And then at the beginning it's all right, but then they begrudge it later on because they're not getting rewarded for the extra stuff, and they thought it was temporary maybe. Yes.
And the other person can often go, why are you angry? Because you wanted it done this way, so you've taken it up. So, you know, do it.
Yeah. And what happens with changes in roles? Because things change all the time. Like you just think you've got it right, you know, got the higher purpose, the key target, chunked it down. What do they need? What do I need? And then the organisation restructures or something happens, or you change. What are your thoughts on that?
And I guess that's why I love working with the questions, because you can have a quick conversation with your team or with your one-up or whoever on 6 questions versus getting an organisation to rewrite a job description and then having it approved, and all of that can take forever. And so if you're finding, for example, you know, there's a piece of your work that is actually pointless doing and it's using up organisational resources for no reason, you can use these questions to have a conversation with others and say, would it impact you if I didn't do that key task and if I replaced it with this? So it's almost like you can use these questions and as an evolving conversation around performance and around team performance, rather than having to go through a bureaucratic process of getting a job description rewritten and potentially having it reclassified and going through bureaucratic processes. This is a kind of on the run way where you can have, hold on a sec, this isn't working. Let's talk about question, you know, 4 and 5, or let's go back to the drawing board around this one.
Yeah. And I think with this, so is it all right if I black hat it a bit? Because I'm trying to, you know, in different situations.
Yes.
So often, you know, organisations feel secure in structure, or, you know, and so how does this impact then, say, performance reviews? You know, because it's not outlined, you know, job description, a form filled in. It's more, it sounds like it's more of a real time, you know, answer the questions thing. So how can you use it in other ways, even in a very structured environment?
Well, you can most organisations have a performance process that is written generically, and particularly in large organisations, it has to be written in a way that you can drive a truck through every conversation, because it has to apply to the payroll clerk, and it has to apply to the director of operations, and it has to apply to you know, a person who's on the front line delivering service. And so for me, there is organisational requirements set out into performance management documents, and then there is the conversation you have to arrive at the data that you want to put into that document. And I think that you can, if you're thinking really seriously about how do we have ongoing conversations to make sure that we're on track, so that when we come to a performance review, we're not all sitting artificially in a room getting really nervous because we have no idea what information's coming, because we've worked with the questions on the run, and we can continue to have those conversations, and then we can say, okay, what data needs to go into the organisational document for meeting the organisation's procedures and priorities. Similarly, if a job changes, you could work with the questions until such time as you have the job description rewritten and reclassified.
Okay, great. So it sounds like they're quite versatile, and they're, you know, you can use them really in a whole lot of different ways.
Yes, yeah. And I think that they're a lot more user-friendly than some of the organisational documents, which are meeting other purposes. So I'm not saying you don't need those other things. They're just not as approachable and not as easy to have a conversation about.
Yeah, great. And so the last 3, which we talked about what you need to provide to other people, what they need to give to you. And what was number 6?
So number 6 is about the boundaries. So it's really useful when you're in a job to know when you're about to step outside boundaries. And sometimes that can be quite formal. So that can be about mandated, what do you have approval to give and what don't you have approval to give? That in a say for a leadership role, often there's a boundary that I don't get my hands dirty. I don't dive in nose deep into the service delivery because my job's actually leading. And if I know that's a boundary, but if, the world's gone pear-shaped and we're really struggling on a particular day, then I know I can step outside that boundary as long as I don't stay outside that boundary for weeks and months and years. So it is around saying what is included in the role and what is not included in the role. And it's not meant as this whole thing is not meant as a box to keep people in. It's just meant as an understanding where the lines in the sand are, and what are the compasses we can use to make decisions about how we use our time, what we prioritize, and how we resolve problems and negotiate with people.
Yeah. So say, for instance, Charles, who's taken over our head of marketing, who's actually helping run behind the scenes here, he might say, work it out and decide that he will oversee the newspaper, but he'll never do graphics or write anything for it or whatever. And then another one might be, in extreme circumstances, he might do such and such.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah. So for a great example, so if his job is to actually, the purpose is to oversee the collateral that the business sends out and the messages and things like that, then him writing it all won't necessarily fit in the role. And so the actual production piece won't necessarily, maybe not be in his role. But in times of, someone's sick and
we've lost Celia for a moment. So it sounds there like, if someone is sick with talking about the boundaries, where you would, it's like, setting up the rules so everyone knows where they stand. But in extreme circumstances, like someone's sick or something's going on, then you wouldn't necessarily, you'd have like contingencies.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, look, it's all for me, it's all, there's no perfect world where there's black and white and there's lines that we all just operate in and go, that's not my job, so I'm not going to help out. But it is a way to exactly know the rules of the game and to be able to renegotiate them if you need to.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so these are great 6 things. We talked a little bit about job descriptions at the beginning. Do you get rid of them altogether, or what do you do with them?
Well, I think a lot of HR processes exist because leaders either have, in large organizations, they want to say this happens to you in exactly the same way. So everybody who needs a description of their job that includes the following things. And so it's often a way of standardizing. If you're working in a really small organization or an agile organization, I could see that you could use these questions. The thing that a job description does, though, over and above this, is identify what the capacity and capabilities, and when you're looking for someone in the role or you're developing someone into the role, you go to that to be informed. So it would depend on how you wanted to answer those questions, what you did with job descriptions. I like to go to first principles and say, what is the purpose of the job description, and then what do we need here in this business? So fit for purpose.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're not totally saying they're a waste of time, but they have their place.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. It's just I guess the thing for me when you're looking at performance is that the job description isn't going to help you in the day-to-day.
Yeah. And I also think with what, because sometimes leaders are scared of what people will ask for, or what people, look, it's like this, it's a bit scary. I know a lot of people are scared that, they're going to be asked for pay rises, or they're going to ask for what you can't give them.
Yes.
And I think that's what a lot of leaders may be thinking out there. Well, at least the job description gives it boundaries, but really it's, in a practical sense, it really doesn't.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think the value for leaders is if they're worried about those things, is to actually think up what response do you want to have before you go into a conversation like that. So if you think talking through these 6 questions is going to result in a conversation with unions or with the pay scales or something like that, then think the response about, and be very clear about the intent of why you want this conversation. And so for me, it's about it is about alignment, and it is about intentional. The intention is to actually raise and resolve any issues between roles, within roles, understanding of roles, and aligning people's expectations.
Yeah, great. Now, just say I've got an established team, and they're they're a great team, but improve. But so, what's coming up for me is, say, would the leader, just say there's a role, right? And there's the leader of the role who oversees the person in the role. Let's do a scenario. So somebody is in finance. It's a small business. They're in finance, and they're answerable to the director of business. So the finance person, when I say finance, they do the invoicing and the zero and the reconciling and all that sort of stuff, right? Now, it's well established, it's going well. So then if you bring these questions in, who is it that they both answer the questions and then come together and discuss it? Or does the leader then do it first, and then the person working for them then do it? So I'm trying to nut out how it would work in an established situation.
Yep. Okay. So I would think that there would be usually a desire for a conversation for greater clarity. So if I'm sitting in a role and it's too big for me, or it is, or I think that my leader has got a different view about what being successful in the role is like, I might put down my answers to this and then go and say, look, I want to have a conversation with you, and I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, because if we're not, we need to sort it. Similarly with the leader, if they've got someone who's merrily doing 3/4 of the job and ignoring, a quarter of the job, that it might be worth sitting down and using the questions and going, but what about this piece of the role, And often, and I've kind of continually referred to it being used in teams, is it can be a good starting place for conversations about how could we take this team to the next step.
Yeah, great. And so how do you support teams and leaders to do this?
The reason why I ended up talking about this is because I think this is a really nice entry when you've either got a really complex task or a really big goal that you're going for, or things have gotten a little bit unclear, or I keep saying pear-shaped, but that's my way of putting it, that this is a great place to start. And from there, you can identify where the issues are. And so if the issues are that you don't have any way of resolving issues, then you can do some stuff on problem solving, or you can do some stuff on decision making, or you can do some stuff on conversations, deepening conversations about the big picture or the operational stuff. And so I just think it's a really nice entry piece to start to then talk about how can we actually improve what we're doing, or take it further because we've got a really big goal in front of us, or we're growing and things are messy. Let's just use this now.
Yeah. So what I was getting at, Celia, is I think you have a brilliant mind and you are just amazing at supporting teams. So do people contact you and then you come in and support them to deliver this, to work out the way to use the questions? Like, what's the next step for people who thought you're ace like I do and want to do that?
Yeah, so I'm happy to work in a couple of different ways. One is I do one-on-one coaching, so I can help people use it for themselves or get prepped to use it with their teams, or I can facilitate it with teams. And the other piece is to actually use it as a leadership development activity.
Sorry, yeah.
So that you've got people really understanding role and able to have conversations around role. So that's probably 3 angles that I go with it for.
Excellent. So what's the first step is to get contact. You can contact Celia at celiaswales.com.
Yes.
Or on LinkedIn, I'm presuming it's Celia Swales.
Yes, it is.
So thank you so much for joining us today. I think you are a superstar. You have so many insights. You say it as it is. You can have a laugh. I think sometimes, leaders and teams take themselves way too seriously. You can have a laugh, but still, be really focused and help people get the outcomes today that they need. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the invite, Maureen. It's been fun, as usual. The only thing I didn't achieve is I didn't get you to sing today, which is what I usually do.
I can sing us out. And what we'll do is we'll put the 6 questions in the comments for people who are interested in them. So time to go home with the cat and everything. See you later. This is George. Say hi, George. So if you'd like to see more interviews with amazing business owners sharing extraordinary insights, click subscribe, then click the bell button, then click all, and we'll notify you.